Hi guys, how are you? I hope you're doing well and you're watching my YouTube channel Advanced Technology by Rana. In the last session, guys, we have done the configuration on the Paloalto firewall with the assignment of the IP addresses and creation of zone. Then we create a management profile and we create a default router. Okay, and we make a reachability test from the switch and router side. And in today's video, we'll move one step forward with the concept of NAT, and we will see how many types of NAT is there and how it works. As of today, there are a lot of definition available with the NAT concept, but I will try my level best to keep it as simple as possible. So let's start our lecture for today. And before I start, please don't forget to subscribe and like this channel. And if you like the video, or if you have any concern or any advice which can improve, please, I will really appreciate your feedback, even if it is a one word or one single line of comment. Okay, so let's start our lab for today. As you are aware, what is a NAT? Network Address Translation. Okay, we have some public IP addresses and we have some private IP addresses. You are well aware that to go to the internet, you cannot go with the private IP addresses. You always need a public IP address. But first, we will see why there is a need for private IP and why there is public IP. What is the difference and why it's a two segregation of private versus public. I created one document here. As of today, there are around 4 billion IPv4 addresses available. Okay, in the past 20 years, there is a lot of expansion in the corporate sector, and the world become a global village. So these 4 billion addresses are not enough to fulfill the requirement for all the people. So to overcome this issue with the limited public IP addresses or IP addresses, there is concept come for the private addresses pool. So the IANA, which is the company who assigned the IP addresses, it reserve three different subnets, okay, which is 10.0.0 till 10.255.255.25 and 172.16.0.0 and 192.168.0.0. They reserve this subnet to use on the private cloud or on the private network. So in short, these subnet ranges are not available on the ISP or on a public cloud. So what is the advantage for making this reservation of the private IP? That this issue resolve the issue with the limited IP addresses. So any company or corporate or even at your home, you can use these private IP addresses for your internal network, and these addresses can be used at same time. So this is resolve the issue for the limited IPv4 addresses and concept generated for private versus public. I hope it is clear now. So let's start with the concept of NAT, network address translation. So whenever you will move from your private IP to the internet, you always need a help of public IP. Okay, so this is called network address translation, and this concept is not limited with private to public. Even though if you want to connect from public to private, you need a NAT. Okay, a network address translation. So let's see how many types of NAT available and how it work. Basically, there are two major types of NAT. The first type is source address translation, and second type is destination address translation. In the source address translation, there are again three subtypes. One is static NAT, one is dynamic NAT, and one is port address translation. So what is a static NAT, what is a dynamic NAT, and what is a PAT, port address translation? So this is the shortest definition of static NAT. So what is the static NAT? One-to-one address mapping between local and global address. What is the dynamic NAT? Many-to-many address mapping between local and global address. And what is the PAT? Many-to-one address mapping between local and global addresses. This method is also known as overloading, NAT overloading. Okay, so let's see what is a static NAT, which is one-to-one address mapping between local and global addresses. I have an example. So this is the example of source static NAT. So what happened in a source static NAT? You have your private network and you have your public network. So in a source static NAT, you just buy some public IPs from the ISP, okay, and you make the mapping of this public IP with your private network or with your private IPs. So what is the advantage and how it will work? So if you have, for example, 50 private addresses and you want these 50 people to reachable with the public cloud, so in this context with the source static NAT, you need 50 public IPs. Okay, and this 50 public IP will be mapped against 50 private IP. So your first private IP, like in this example, is 192.168.0.1, will map with 203.31.218.208, and this will remain with this public IP. Okay, so it's mean you reserve one private IP with one public IP, but this is not a practical example as of today. Okay, like you cannot bear a big cost of public IP. For example, if you have 500 or 5,000 or 1000 or 10,000 of private IPs, so you cannot buy 10,000 or 5,000 or 500 public IP. It will cost you a lot. Okay, so if you have a limited number of hosts, in that context you can make a static NAT. The real-time example I will give you for the static NAT, to assign some servers which are your public server. For example, you have your company and your company want to advertise that server with some outer client or outside world. So you will take the public IP and assign to that specific server, so this server is reachable from the outside world or from the public network. Okay, so this way you can manage with very limited number of public IPs. Okay, and it will work with as a static NAT. So the next example, source dynamic NAT. So what is a source dynamic NAT? In this concept, you just buy some public IPs, okay, and you create a pool of those public IP and define in your firewall, and then your firewall take those public IP and assign to your private IP. This concept is almost same, almost with a source static NAT. The major difference in a source static NAT, you make reservation one-to-one. Like you will say some specific private IP will bind with a private public IP. Okay, but sorry, I mean your private host will map with your public IP. But in dynamic dynamic NAT, what you will do, you just define the pool in your firewall, and firewall take randomly IPs and assign to some your private IP. Okay, so for example, if you have 10 private IPs and you have 5 public IP, so 5 private IPs will assign 5 public IP by the firewall, and the remaining 5 will stay until the first 5 will time out, and then the firewall will assign some public IP which is free, and they will assign to your next available private IP. Okay, so this is called source dynamic NAT. Then there is a concept of port address translation. This is the most famous topology or concept, and this is mostly in use nowadays. What happened in the port address translation? You always have one public IP, and there is a system generated ports, okay, which will assign with this public IP, and you are allowed to move to the public cloud. What has happened and how this happened? For example, you have this host 192.168.0.1, and this private IP want to reach 200.0.0.1 with port 23 on the internet. Okay, so when this request come to this router or the firewall, it have a public IP assigned, okay, on the outside interface. It will bind this host IP, okay, with this public IP 203.31.218.100, and put randomly generated port 3000, and then send this traffic to the internet, okay, to this destination on port 23, which is telnet. So this is a concept of a PAT. So in short, in the PAT, you does not need a big number of public IP. You will just work with very few public IP. Okay, at least with the one public IP, you can easily work, and your whole private network will reach to the public network. There is one more example is here. Okay, in this example, there are three hosts. Two hosts are reaching to the same destination, which is 200.0.0.1 port 23, which is a telnet port, and this second host 192.168.0.2 also going to the same destination with port 23. When this router or firewall receives this request, it has the same public IP 203.31.218.100, but the port which is system generated, okay, random port, this is a different between two hosts. So both hosts going to same destination with the same public IP, but with a different port number. So this way it is reachable to the internet cloud. I hope this is very much clear with you about a source static NAT, source dynamic, and PAT. Yes, guys. So the second type is destination NAT translation. Same as it is, there is a source address translation. There is a second type, which is a destination address translation. What is happen in the destination address translation? There are two types. One is static NAT, one is dynamic NAT in a destination address translation. Okay, so why we use static NAT in a destination address translation? This is the below example in which you have some public IPs or public server. Actually, you have two public server. One public you have two servers inside network. You have two server, one server with 192.168.0.10, and the second server is 192.168.0.20. So the static NAT you use in the destination address, you bought two public IP, okay, and you map those public IPs with your internal server. For example, here you take one public IP 203.31.218.60, which is mapped with 192.168.0.10, and second public IP 203.31.218.55 mapped with 192.168.0.20. Okay, so you map with this one. This is your some internal server, and you want your external people to connect this one. So they will connect your server with your public IP given by the ISP, and your internal IP will be hidden from the outside world. So this is for the security reason and to make it routable on the external world. You make this the destination address translation with the help of static NAT. Okay, so this is the example of static NAT in destination address translation. Second thing is here dynamic net. Okay, I will use the same example. In a dynamic net, what you will do basically, you will assign a pool of IPs. Okay, in with your servers, and you will assign a dynamic public pool with the IP. And the big advantage normally you do this concept is basically on the cloud services. Okay, where you are using the load balancing, and your servers are always available with the external world, so you do not need to change the IPs randomly. So automatically it will take the IP from the pool and assign to your web server. So this is the concept of destination address translation. There is one more example I want to share with you here, the last diagram for our today. You people hear about a source, pre-net source. Okay, so let's see the concept of pre-net source, post-net source, and pre-net destination and post-net destination. These are the common word which you will hear during the firewall concept. So what happened here? I have here, this is my internal network. Okay. So this is my private network. Okay. This is my ISP, which is the cloud. Okay. And this is my DFG server. So here I have my private IP 192.168.1.0. So once this IP is assigned to my internal host, we call it pre-net source. Okay, so this is my pre-net source. What is the pre-net source? The source IP address on the host on the LAN with 192.168.1.0. Okay, so this is before the net translation. So we call it pre-net source. So once this is also my this is the public IP. This is a public IP. So once this host reach to this interface of the firewall, and it become mapped with this public IP, okay, it will call post net source. Post net source. So what will happen here? That 192.168.1.0 is mapped with 192.0.2.1 with some port number, random generated. Okay, so this call post net source. So the next destination of this host is 192.0.2.50.2.250. So before this packet leaving from here with this mapping 192.0.2.1 with the random port, this will call pre-net destination. Okay, because it's not started until now. And once this IP will reach to this server, it will call post-net destination. What call? Post-net destination. Okay, so these are the common word which normally used in the firewall topology: pre-net source, post-net source, and then it will be a pre-net destination and post-net destination. So this is important to explain you guys, that don't be worried with this kind of concept. This is just a common word which are using in the firewall topology. Okay, guys. So today is our we have done our lecture for today, and we see the concept of NAT and static with dynamic and PAT, then source versus destination NAT, and the concept of pre-net source, post-net source. I hope you have enjoyed this video, and guys, please give your feedback if you like this video, and I will wait for your valuable feedback. Thank you and take care. Allah Hafiz. Bye bye.